Three, two, one. This meeting of the Starkville Board of Alderman will now come to order. Please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Semantics.
All right, you have before you a copy of the modified written agenda, and I have one revision before I open it to revisions from the board. That is to strike item 9C under Mayor's Business, discussion and consideration of the approval of a contract with Taylor Adams for cooperative procurement services for the city of Starkville. I had hoped to have a contract ready for your review tonight. That document is not ready at this time. So without objection, we'll strike that item. Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, revisions from the board.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Perkins.
in the future, with any contract, could we get it in our packet prior to getting it to board meeting?
Yes, and that is always my objective.
Yes, sir.
But sometimes with document review, it
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr.
drags
Mayor.
on a little bit.
I appreciate it greatly.
Further proposed revision.
I've got a few. I'm sorry.
Alderman Dimmock.
I'll yield to Alderman Parker.
Alderman Parker.
I'm not ready. Go ahead.
Alderman Dimmock.
Under Mayor's Business, item B to consent.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. Let me just, a couple things. I have no objection, but a few things going to be added on. I just want to have a question, and I have no objection to that. But as we go through this, I'd like to know where that money's going to come from. There's no problem with it. Where's that money going to come from for this item?
Contingency.
Okay, so, okay, all right.
Yeah. And something else needs to be noted that was not in the packet. That $5,000 is an up to amount that would cover both what is required to sponsor the Mayor's Youth Council Convention and also Mayor's Youth Council attendees to the conference on the coast this summer.
No objection. Just want to know where it's going to come from.
Right. And it will come from contingency. So the proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item 9B, the approval of the Mayor's Youth Council participating in the statewide youth conference held on the campus at MSU and the MML annual conference for an amount not to exceed $5,000 coming from the contingency fund to the consent agenda. Any objection? Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection? Any objection? Any?
I don't have an objection as long as we just note at this time. That's a pretty substantial item for it to be in Starkville 2 years after the mayor started his youth council, and it shows a lot of support coming out of this board and aldermen and throughout the state. And again, it's a good economic development thing. It's good to get all these kids from around the state to come in and recognize Starkville and recognize Mississippi State University. So I guess I'll give kudos out to the mayor for getting it in Starkville on his second year, and that's quite an accomplishment.
And kudos to the city clerk, who's been instrumental in establishing this program.
That's right.
And I'd like to add that I think it's important that next generation is getting involved in governance. So that's a critical component of all this.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Do we have any further proposed revisions, Alderman Davis?
Under Board Business, item A to consent, but I'd like to clarify that with making sure that a copy is given to the personnel officer.
All right, so Alderman Dumas' proposed revision is to place item 10A, the approval of engaging the Stennis Institute to conduct a comprehensive job description and salary survey for the city of Starkville. What was the addition?
With a copy being directed to the personnel director.
With a copy of the results of the study being directed to the personnel officer.
That's correct.
Alderman Davis, that's your proposed revision?
It is.
All right, any objection? Any objection?
I would just like to add in that it be completed by the end of calendar year 2012.
Alderman Dumas, can you treat that as friendly?
Absolutely.
All right, so that will be same revision as stated before, but we'll also include the language that it will be completed by the end of calendar year 2012. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
Yes.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that measure's been placed on the consent agenda.
Under board business, item B, to consent with the two appointments being Jim Gafford from Ward 5 and Kane Overstreet from Ward 3.
All right. Alderman Dumas has proposed moving item 10B, the appointment to the Transportation Committee of Jim Gafford from Ward 5 and Kane Overstreet from Ward 3 for the terms beginning on March 1st, 2012. Alderman Dumas, that's your proposed revision.
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Further proposed revisions.
Under item, G, Fire Department, I'd like to place item 2 to consent with a hearty congratulations to our fire chief for that award.
Yes, and Chief, before that matter goes on the consent agenda, would you like to touch on the significance of that, because it is a matter of public concern?
Yes, sir. Mayor, you know, we've been struggling the last 3 or 4 years trying to find a way to replace fire trucks, and this will certainly go a long way in having our feet. 3 times a year, there's grant applications are accepted at Homeland Security, and we do spend a lot of time applying for grants in the last 2 or 4 years. We've been very successful. Just glad security.
Well, you've done an excellent job, and it is a very pressing need of the cities. And also, my understanding is there is a possibility that Congressman Harper might be here as early as tomorrow to participate in a more formal announcement of the grant opportunity. Is that correct, Chief? Okay. So we'll look forward to a visit, if not tomorrow, at some point, to make a more formal announcement of the grant. This is big news. This is very important. The proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place the approval of the acceptance of the Assistance to Firefighters grant for $750,000 with a 10% match of $75,000 as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, that's your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Further proposed revision.
Under personnel, item 1 to consent, but just to clarify, the last paragraph, it's listed as personnel director, and I've been informed that should be personnel officer. So that on consent with those corrections, or that one correction.
All right, Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place item 11I1, the approval of revision to the personnel policy against sexual harassment to include other forms of unlawful harassment as presented with the all references to personnel director being changed to personnel officer on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Further proposed revision.
Under personnel, item 2 to consent.
All right, Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place item 11I2, the approval of promotions to the rank of sergeant in the fire department as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revision?
Under personnel, item 3, was there a pay listed? I don't know if I just overlooked that or not. I just want to clarify that pay for that part-time position. It was not?
Ms. Rule, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, may I recognize?
You may.
Would you come forward and give us I think it'd be a good idea, we can attach the pay if you know it with this position, so we'll have to deal with it at the next meeting, after the advertisement. Do you have a pay, do you know what that is, or could you get that?
Well, at the time we created the position, we were not sure.
Okay.
Because it was in 2008, and it was a new position for the city and pretty much statewide, and so we went with a rate that was an hourly rate.
Okay.
I can't call it off the top of my head, but it was a going rate for an attorney at the time.
Oh, I see.
I think Ms. Turner,
Well, that's fine. So,
65 an hour.
okay, so you recommend the same?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you just put that in.
I moved that's on consent with a rate of $65 an hour.
Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to move item 11I3, the approval of advertising to fill the part-time position of administrative hearing officer as presented with a rate of $65 per hour to the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, that's your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda.
Under Personnel, item 4 to consent.
Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place item 11I4, the approval of the promotion of Thomas Ware to fill the vacant position of laboratory technician in the wastewater division of the Public Services Department on the consent agenda as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Further proposed
My
revision.
final,
Go ahead and get 6 while you're there. On personnel.
item 6. I
Alderman
know
Dumas
Alderman
is,
Sistrunk had a question on that.
No, I'm sorry, I'm waiting.
Alderman Dumas is,
You want to wait? Leave item 6 off the consent?
No.
Well, I have no problem with item 6 under personnel being placed on consent.
Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place item 11I6, the authorization to advertise to hire 2 temporary part-time court security officers as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, that's your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Alderman
Mayor.
Sistrunk, is that an objection?
I wanted to add a date certain, since these are temporary. I'd like to make that through September 30th with the opportunity to review, of course, at the end of that period. And if it's working out, we can budget for it in 2013.
Alderman Dumas, do you accept that as friendly?
I do.
All right, so the proposed revision is to place the authorization to advertise to hire 2 temporary part-time court security officers until September 30th, 2012 on the consent agenda. Any objection?
No objection. May I be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Mayor, let me just say very briefly, want to thank the chief for coming with this recommendation, because what this does is it's a management decision on his part to recommend to the board for the creation of 2 new employees here, so we can have a very secure, safe environment for our court system. And this is how we need to kind of look at these things as they come. I think this is something needed, because I'm in and out of the courts all the time. We need to make sure that they are very secure on this, and I'm glad that we do have this recommendation, because I don't practice in city court, because I'm in this city court of the city of Starkville, because I'm on the city council, but just want to appreciate him for this recommendation here. So, of course, I have no objection to it.
Any objection? Do we have any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that measure's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, you have further proposed revision.
This is just a question under item 4 under sanitation. Ms. Boyd, the 25-yard rear loading waste trucks, are those, I know when we deal with these things on campus, those cause considerable wear and tear on roads. Are those, and I understand the economy of large trips, or less trips to the landfill. Have we ever explored looking at smaller trucks and to be used in some of the older neighborhoods specifically?
These are the trucks that we have to make every day right now. We have 2 of the smallest trucks that you see are the 25-yard trucks. Those are the smallest. I would recommend being the department head of sanitation and environmental services, because of so much of the solid waste that we have to pick up daily. I would recommend that we continue to use the 25-yard trucks, and that the city streets, be maintained as per the specs.
Alderman Parker.
And she actually used to run 32-yard rear loaders, so she has lowered it from 32 to 25 just in the last 3 years.
Yes, sir.
So we haven't been running the 25-yard that long. They're
And just small knowledge, what's the next step below 25?
20, 16, 14, 12.
Okay. I have no issue with it.
Any further proposed revisions? Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, under sanitation and environmental service, I see a report, and the report is, it's clearly written. Is there any reason we cannot put that on the consent agenda, the report from Ms. Boyd?
No, I don't anticipate that Ms. Boyd had,
My recommendation is to put it on the consent. That's my recommendation.
all right. A recommendation from, or proposed revision from Alderman Perkins to place the report on the implementation plans of a formal litter control program on the consent agenda. Alderman Perkins, is that your proposed revision?
Yes, sir.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none.
Mayor,
That-
just wondering if it's gonna be a report for public knowledge, if this is something that we can disseminate or give copies at City Hall or something.
We certainly can. It's, in addition to it being public information, we can have copies available in the mayor's office. Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Further proposed revision. Do we have any further proposed revision?
Can I try one? I don't know if it will, if it will make it through or not. So, under board business, item C, consideration of the acceptance of the RFQ from T.E. Lott and Company for internal control consultant with areas of emphasis to be limited to grants administration, payroll, and accounts payable. This will give the city clerk a chance to, you're not ready for discussion, but this would give the city clerk's office a chance to adapt to the new software, address those issues, and then we can move forward with other parts later if we see fit.
Proposed revision from Alderman Sistrunk is to place the acceptance of the RFQ from T. Lott and Company for internal control consultant as presented, but limited to the following areas of service: grants administration, payroll, and accounts payable on the consent agenda. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Is that an objection?
No, sir. My question is, what is the cost for this professional service?
It will depend on the number of hours actually involved. Their original estimate, based on the total, total internal control review, was 150 to 200 hours. I think this will be probably more in the area of 90 hours, and so it will be dependent on the people who actually do the work and the hours involved.
Vice Mayor, a couple of questions. What is the projected hourly rate, and what do you foresee as a budgeted amount for this?
I think that a blended hourly rate from the people who are doing most of the work to the partners who will do review will probably put this at about $10,000. I can't speak with certainty since I'm not going to be the one doing the work, but I think it will be about $10,000, and I expect it to come from contingency funds.
Let's keep our object to consent.
All right, so that matter will remain on the regular agenda. Do we have any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Alderman Corey to approve the agenda as revised. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Carver. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. You now have before you the consideration of the approval of the consent agenda as revised. Is there any objection to the approval of the consent agenda as revised? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda as revised has been approved. And that will take us to the consideration of the approval of the minutes from January 3rd, 2012. Discussion. Alderman Parker?
I've just got a small, I know this is very small and semantics. Whenever a motion fails, I don't know that we need to, and city attorney, you tell me if this matters. As far, like, when a motion fails, it says having received a majority affirmative vote, but then it does say the mayor declared the motion failed. Does that really matter?
It should say having failed to receive a majority affirmative vote.
Okay, well, can we
That's
just,
the typographic.
That's a correction
I'll just
that
make the
needs to be
motion
made.
just to make those changes? Approve them as they are, just with those small changes?
Yeah.
Just to review those?
What section is that? Which section? Is that
If
the
you
whole
have
reading?
a specific section you'd like to refer to, you can include that in the motion.
There's several. And
Okay.
There were several votes that passed during these two, several votes that failed during these two sets.
With appropriate clerical changes.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Alderman Parker has made a motion to approve of the minutes from the regular meeting of the Board of Alderman of the City of Starkville for January 3rd, 2012, with the appropriate clerical changes. Alderman Parker, is that your motion?
That's it.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Parker, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Saying none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of the minutes from January 17th, 2012.
Same.
All right, Alderman Parker has made a motion to approve of the minutes of the recessed meeting of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville for January 17th, 2012, with appropriate clerical changes. Alderman Parker, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Parker, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. And that will carry us to announcements and comments. And the only announcement I have this evening is the introduction of our two newest city employees. And I'd first like to introduce Adam Goff. It is my pleasure to welcome Adam Goff as our new staff accountant at the Starkville Electric Department. Adam is originally from Meridian, Mississippi, and attended Lamar School. He is a graduate of Mississippi State University with a Bachelor of Accounting degree. Before joining the City of Starkville, Adam worked at Imaging Center of Columbus and Newell Paper Company in Meridian. Adam is the son of Robbie and Debbie Goff of Meridian. In his spare time, Adam enjoys sports, reading, and anything involving Mississippi State. He is a member of Highland Baptist Church in Meridian. Please join me in welcoming Adam. I'd now like to introduce Amy Vaughn. It is a pleasure to welcome Amy Vaughn as our new Deputy Court Clerk for Municipal Court. Amy is originally from Amory and is a graduate of Amory High School. She attended Mississippi State University, where she studied aerospace engineering and then graduated with a degree in interior design. Previously, Amy worked for East Mississippi Lumber Company as an interior designer. Amy has a menagerie of animals that keep her very busy. She has 4 dogs, 4 horses, 10 cats, and 1 goat. Amy also enjoys spending time with her boyfriend, John McKee. In her spare time, she reads and makes jewelry. Amy attends First Baptist Church of Starkville. Please join me in welcoming Amy Vaughn. And that will conclude my announcements and comments for this evening. Do we have any announcements and comments from the members of the board? Alderman Dimmons.
I've got, I had 2, but we've already recognized the chief. The other one, just last week, we had our sales tax figures come out, and I just want to draw attention to, we talk about jobs, we talk about quality of life, we talk about a number of things from this board table. And this past year, we saw an increase in 2.51% in sales tax, and we saw an increase in 2% money, which is hotel and restaurant tax, of 7.14%. And this is it's good, it's stable, but when you compare that to other regions of the state, when you compare it to other regions in the country, there was an article, a lengthy article in the Sun Herald that talked about the lack of growth in coastal economies in other parts of the state, and I think this is testament of not only things we're doing, but yes, it means the university's doing good, yes, it means we're as a city are doing good, but I think all things collectively, this is a good trend. And so kudos to everyone who's made a big difference in helping, because when you look at the millage rate we have and we live and die by sales tax, and it's such an incremental or important part of our revenue streams for the city, this obviously is definitely a good trend to see. So keep up the good work.
Further announcements and comments from the members of the board? Any further announcements and comments from the members of the board? Any further board member comments? Seeing none, we'll move to citizen comments. And at this time, any citizen wishing to come forward and make comments may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Good evening to the mayor and board. My name is Alvin Turner, Ward 7. Would like to recognize Vice Mayor C. Trump and Alderman Vaughn.
Thank you,
Mr.
Alvin.
Turner.
And in reference to Black History, we'd like to recognize Alderman Vaughn, Alderman Perkins, Makita Outlaw, Sharon Boyd, Shantae Wilson, and Pamela Daniel. The citizens would like for soon as possible, if they could get an article in the paper about where trailers should be zoned or not. They're getting very irritated about what the ordinance says about trailers in the city. Also, the citizen was very disturbed about the last board meeting, how the city clerk was treated. Let us do better because the city clerk office is the brain of the city, and if we irritate or tear it down, that could shut the whole city down. Let's be more respectful to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Do we have any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move to public appearances, and we have 2 scheduled public appearances tonight. The first is the annual appearance of our municipal court judge, Rodney Favors.
Mayor and Board, on behalf of all the employees of municipal court, we appreciate you allowing us the opportunity to serve the citizens of the city of Starkville. I feel this year that we have had an exemplary year, one that all the citizens should be proud of. With Mr. Rook is passing out some figures for you that I'll give you a chance to look over before I make any more remarks. As you can see by looking at the figures that you received, this is a record year for the city of Starkville Municipal Court. We had more total new cases this year than we have ever had in the history of the Starkville Municipal Court. You can also see that the numbers reflected the amounts of monies that were collected were also record numbers. I attribute these things to the hard work of all the people in municipal court. That includes the police officers serving warrants, making arrests, writing tickets. That is the clerks collecting the fines, collecting the paperwork, and the probation officers that serve the court. Through a group effort, we've been able to bring you these figures that we have here tonight. And so my hat's off, and your hats off as well should be to the employees of municipal court, because there are no finer group in the state of Mississippi that I've ever come in contact with. And I'm sure Alderman Perkins would back me up on that because he's in court as much as I am. And we are continuously told by attorneys that come to our court how well run it is and how efficient it is. And I'm proud to sit here before you today and tell you these things because I am proud to be the municipal judge, and I personally appreciate you allowing me to serve the citizens. And I will continue to try to do and be as fair as I possibly can to all the citizens that come before me at that bench right there. So if you have any questions, there's also another aspect of this that we don't include in our figures, but we have the numbers for you if you would like to know them. The citizens who cannot meet their financial obligations through their fines, we also have a program that's been very successful. It's run by some of the police officers that Chief Lindley assigns to do work for the citizens of the city of Starkville in various things, such as could be from washing cars, police cars, to working at the Parks and Rec. That's administered by the police officers. So in addition to the numbers that you see before you, there is a large amount of money that is received in terms of work by these people who I allow to work their fines off because they're not financially able to do it any other way. And that's a credit to Chief Lindley and his department, because they're the ones, all I can do is assign these people to do these jobs. And it's a credit to the chief and his people, because they're the ones that actually have responsibility for overseeing it. And that program has been successful as well, and we've got those numbers for you, but it's a significant amount of money that the city is saving in manpower. So with that, I know you have important business, and if you have any questions, myself or Mr. Rook will be glad to answer them. If not, we will leave y'all, and if you will excuse us, we'll leave and let y'all get on to more important business.
Do we have any questions or comments for Judge Faber? Alderman Perkins.
Judge, I just want to personally thank you for your leadership with the court. And of course, I had the opportunity to serve with you while you were city attorney for this city of Stark. You did a great job, and we want to appreciate Mr. Rook for his great job as court administrator. And of course, I do hear from other attorneys, out of town, in town, what a fine job that y'all do in running the court. And it's certainly reflected in your statistics and all the things that you do. And we just want to thank you and highly commend you for a job well done.
We appreciate your kind words, Alderman.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We do appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board?
I have a quick question,
ma'am.
just to be sure I'm reading the graphics
Yes, ma'am.
correctly. These are fines and assessments collected, not assessed.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Yes, ma'am.
have you accounted for do you assign any value to the fines that were worked off, or are they counted in
That's
here as okay, this is strictly collection?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's why I said, Alderwoman Sistrunk, that's why I was saying, in addition
Right.
to those,
Right.
there's a significant amount
Right.
of money that is collected in terms of manpower,
Right.
with people working off fines for doing various tasks throughout the city. Not just the police department, they help Mr. Wright, the public's, because I've authorized them to go out there and do that.
Right.
Wherever somebody needs, they work in the clerk's office.
They work in our office.
I've seen them.
They do
I've seen
various
them.
things, so it's not just the police department, but what I'm saying is Chief Lindley and his people are the ones that have to be responsible. I just say you can go do this, but Chief Lindley has to be responsible for making sure it gets done. So it's a group effort throughout municipal court.
And I appreciate y'all being sensitive to the fact that these are difficult times, and there are people who don't have a mechanism for meeting those payments otherwise. So thank you.
We try to give everybody an opportunity to do it that way. If they present us, if they ask and they show us that they can't do it, then we're more than willing to let them do that, because we don't want to, we're not a debtor's prison.
Right.
We want to give everybody an opportunity that maybe doesn't have the financial means to meet their obligations to the citizens of the city of Starkville, to do it that way, rather than monetarily.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Has the integration of our police and court software been beneficial in your day-to-day activities and being able to process cases?
I'll let my esteemed city court administrator handle that, because he's the one that deals with the day-to-day computer.
It's integrated to an extent. We'd like to see more integration, but until you start swiping driver's license out there on the street, it's not going to be where we would like for it to be. But it certainly is much better than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board? Do we have any further questions or comments? Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Judge Faber.
Will you be excused?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The board has it in their packet.
Our next public appearance this evening is our final public appearance from Ms. Jenny Turner, the Administrative Hearing Officer. As many of you know, Ms. Turner is leaving us to go be on the school board. Ms. Turner?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman, in 2011, the Administrative Division scheduled hearings for 154 cases. Of those cases, approximately half came in and paid their fines prior to the hearings. We conducted 18 hearings in 2011 with police officers serving as prosecutors on the false alarm cases, the animal control officers serving as prosecutors on the animal neglect cases, and code enforcement employees serving as prosecutors on the other code violations. In your packet, there's a graph of all the kinds of cases we've handled in this past year. As you see, more than half of these cases this year dealt with the new helmet ordinance. I've enjoyed serving as your administrative hearing officer and working with Bill Green and Ben Griffith. And matter of fact, Mr. Green and I today started working on a transition notebook for the new administrative hearing officer when you employ them. So that's all we have. We'd be glad to answer any questions that you have about what we've been doing.
Any questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions? Alderman Carter.
I guess that was, you answered part of my question. My question was gonna be, what were you gonna do about the transition, or how could you assist the next administrative hearing officer coming in to make sure that process,
Well,
flows smooth?
Mr. Green and I started a notebook today with the administrative act in it, with all the different fines, things that I would like to have had when we first started out, since we kind of created it. Mr. Green has all the orders that we've done for all the different kinds of, like the dilapidated houses cases you've done. So the new person who comes in, they don't have to use the orders we've used in the past, but at least have something to start from. So we've started working on that today.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Any
Thank you
further-
for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Durham.
Thank you.
Ms. Turner.
Thank you.
All right, that will carry us to our second public hearing on the amendment to the City of Starkville Code of Ordinances, Chapter 30, Business, Article 11, Peddlers, Section 30-26, et sec, in order to come into conformance with the state statute regarding transit vendors, formerly peddlers, and provide for additional locations for vending and additional hours of operations and other related matters. Alderman Dumas?
There's a memo attached, that's on the back side of the staff report. And in this memo, it talks about the changes. The changes that are in this, that were not in this for the first public hearing, you remember we had several weeks ago, was through the review of city attorney and staff, we found that there were specific laws that referenced, and Chris, correct me if I'm telling any of this incorrectly, but that reference transient vendors and not peddlers. And so the most significant changes that have happened in this, other than Section 30-32 that I'll talk about in just a second, has been nothing but striking and replacing peddlers with transient. Is that correct?
With a couple of additions, we incorporated all relevant sections of the transient vendor statute.
Okay.
And just to hit those high points briefly for you, so you know what they are, we incorporated the definition section of the statute. We incorporated the exceptions section of the statute, which is listed right now as proposed Section 3027. We brought in the license fee and bond requirement section of the state statute. We brought in the section of the state statute that spells out specifically what the application procedure is. We brought in the one that spells out that a vendor has to designate a registered agent for service or process. And finally, we incorporated the one that speaks to penalties for non-adherence to the ordinances. Those are the big picture items that we pulled from the statute. In short, we took the statute and incorporated it into our ordinance.
Now, the real key of this that initiated this public hearing process and what's being considered tonight is Section 30-32, which is what's titled Activity in Roadways. And as I talked about beforehand, we currently allow transient vendors in town. They have to be on private property. They have to go through the process of being, if they're a food vendor, sanctioned by the state, Department of Health, other things that have to be in place, and obviously through proper permits through the city clerk's office. What this addition in Section 30-32 does is recognizes that one of the trends nationally is that food vendors, others are setting up more impromptu, and not organic in the sense of organic food, but they're setting up food carts in roadways that are really a sign of the times. And we see this happening in some parts of the Cotton District now on private property. Just this morning at Bill Davis's photography shop, there was one at 8 o'clock this morning selling breakfast, which I found pretty interesting. But as you see in Section 30-32, this would allow anyone to legally park a food truck or a food vendor facility in a parking spot They can't be there for longer than 12 hours. And I think it goes along with the direct aspect that we're talking about with sales tax and food permit, our food taxes increasing, because this is a creative way to interject different ideas, different possibilities for businesses, for those individuals in town who are wanting to expand on what they're doing, because there are a number of restaurants who have come to me specifically and asked for this. And so I hope we'll consider this, and I welcome any questions or comments about how this will impact us. But I think it will be a transformational change in how we look at allowing different things in a more creative way. So with that, I'll yield the floor.
Any questions or comments from Alderman Carver?
I was a transient vendor at times, so I've got questions. Yeah, I mean, so it sounds, like at one point you're saying, kind of against it because they're parking up, and they are showing up, and it's tearing. You're talking about blocking sidewalks and things like that. But again, I guess it promotes it, 'cause what you're going to have is you're going to have creation of business. You're going to have a lot of people trying to put their goods and their ideas out there. But my question is this: it says, to allow the operation for transient vendors beyond the current time of 9 a.m. to half hour before sunset. So will it be shut down at sunset? Because most of this is happening at nighttime hours. So as far as the time frame, I know it's a 12-hour block or a 12-hour increment, but say they set up at 10 in the morning, do they have to go at 10 at night, or vice versa?
Yeah, give me just a second to get there. I know what you're talking about. Let me.
Alderman Carver, are you referencing bullet point 3 on the
Yes, sir.
memorandum?
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding that that was taken out in the last draft. Is that correct?
That's correct. There are no hours set. So, 9 p.m. to 3 in the morning, they can do that. It's more of the demand driven by the, hopefully, the customer. But they just can't be there over 12 hours in one spot. They move, but they can't be able to be located for 12 hours.
And I want to say on that same note, there was something in there also about restricting any type of transient sale on a Sunday, which we,
Yeah, that is not there.
and we struck that as well, so that individuals can sell whatever they're legally licensed to sell on a Sunday as well.
Can they sell beer on Sundays?
They cannot as a transit vendor.
I'm just asking.
No. They cannot.
No, they got a permit. License.
Mayor, may be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Attorney, a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
The first question, let me go to section 30-32. Let me ask both the questions before you respond, please, sir. Want you to give your legal opinion as to whether section 30-32 meet the legal requirements, and do you see any legal problems with regard to transit vendors being allowed to sell food on public property? And secondly and finally, do you see any problem with section 30-31 where there's a prohibition against door-to-door sales on property zone R1, but you can allow it for properties zone other than R1? And of course, I'm not speaking to the merits, just the legality of it. Just address both of those questions.
Sure. With respect to 3032, the board had asked me to provide an opinion on potential legality of a transient vendor set up in a city parking space. And I sent the board an email on that on December 6th, and I'll just read a snippet from it because it's still my opinion tonight. The general rule is that a city has a duty to exercise reasonable care to keep its rights of way reasonably safe for use by persons exercising reasonable care and caution. And I take that to mean that to the extent an injury occurred that was connected in some way to a transient vendor operating in the right-of-way, whether that right-of-way be a parking space or not, the injured party would have at least an arguable claim that the fact that the city allowed the peddler to operate in the city right-of-way violated the city's duty of exercising reasonable care.
And
As to your question about R1, my understanding is that was a policy decision, Alderman. I don't know where that came from. That was not a call I made. To the extent the board wanted to hang on to that designation, it would have to be rationally based to survive rational basis scrutiny.
And I'm not just against it. I just want, when I saw that it just prohibited in one zone, I just want to get your legal opinion on it before we pass it. Just see what do you think legally? I mean.
Well, as you know, this would be a rational basis scrutiny, which means that if the government had a legitimate reason for that specific designation, it would likely stand up under law if it was rationally related to that legitimate reason.
But the difference between R1, 2, and 3, and 4, What's the,
I don't know the public policy that went behind that designation. I don't know why R1 was chosen and not all the R
can I ask,
designations.
Alderman Perkins, is it the designation of specific R1 or is it residential in general?
Well, the designation in this ordinance just says you can engage in door-to-door sales in R1. I'm not just
Right,
against it,
right.
but I just want to make sure that we're legally safe
Right.
on that. In other words, the way it's written, it prohibits these vendors from engaging door-to-door sales in R1, but they can do it in all the other classifications.
Zone, period, yeah.
And finally, Mr. Attorney, there's some potential, and I'm not speaking against the gentleman's ordinance here. I'm just, this is what we do every day, think about these things. But there's some potential liability here with this 3032 if we don't keep our, and I'm not trying to defeat this, but there's some potential liability. I'm just trying to make the case so we keep the right-of-ways clean and safe, So there's potential liability if we don't keep the right-of-ways clean and safe.
Depending on the facts of a particular case, yes, sir.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Carver.
The wheels are turning. So 2 more questions. Somebody sits in a spot all day for 12 hours in the transient vendor, or they're not the transient vendor, the police come by and say, okay, you gotta move. So if they can they legally just put back out of that spot, back into the next spot, and they're legal again?
Seems that way.
Under this ordinance? Is that the way it's written?
That's the way it's written right now.
And then I guess I think for what it's addressing, it's pretty well written. The only other red flag I may think about is when you get these transient vendors and when you really have a lot of people coming in town, or things like the Cotton District Art Festival, when you've got thousands of people coming in, and usually we do in-kind services and shut down a part of the city. Do we, or Alderman Dumas, do you think that we might need to address that as far as a time frame? Only thing I could envision was somebody saying, they're trying to get around the period where they got to clear the streets because they were already there and they got there an hour before we shut the streets down. You get where I'm going with that? Or do you think that that's going to be routinely taken care of when the police come through? And
I would imagine that the special event policy would hold
it does.
court over that one, given that that once that policy is approved, or that permit is approved, that jurisdiction that they define in that application is then rightfully theirs to maintain.
I just want to make sure that no vendor's given preference because they were there before. I want to make sure everybody pays the same fees to set up. And Cotton District Arts Festival is the best example. But so if you think that it addresses that in the special.
Yes, I would hope so. I would not want this to supersede the authority of that agency who was granted the permit for that special event. I wouldn't want this to supersede their authority. But you bring up a good point about the 24-hour period. I think it would be good for us to specify that 24 or 12 hours within a 24-hour period. I don't know how legally that would, but I think that definitely needs to be a part of it, because it's like our RV park. We don't want people to be there 100 days and then go ride around the block and then come back and reset their clock and then park 30 seconds later. That's not what this is intended to be.
Further questions or comments from members of the board? Do we have any further questions or comments from members of the
Just,
board?
we get some feedback next time on the specifically of R1, why it would be just R1? My neighborhood's R4.
Well, I'm thinking about this now, and I'm bringing this forward. I don't know how that actually came into this, and is this a remnant of some of the initial language, Lynn, that were we specific in areas in which this was enforced or not?
Well, when it goes back to the original allowing it from 9 to an hour or 30 minutes before sunset, they were anticipating people who were out selling street by street. This was, from 30 years ago. Our ordinance has not been changed since then. So if we were talking about transient vendors who had hot dog stands or whatever, that was just part of the way to keep it within the more dense area. But, that's just in there, we can certainly remove it. It was somewhat, I won't say arbitrary, but the thought process was based on what we were trying to achieve in having vendors and what the current economy dictates that these folks are doing. Didn't see a hot dog stand setting up in Pleasant Acres, for example.
Well, and there's a couple of things maybe there that could help, is that to do this, you have to be legally parked in a legal parking place. Most of our residential areas don't have parking places within the right-of-way. Most of those are associated with commercial land uses.
So,
Because door to door, I mean, because this does exempt door to door sales as far as people selling books door to door. I mean, they're exempted from this anyway, so there's still gonna be door to door sales in neighborhoods. But this is just specifically dealing with, I mean, you know, we defined it in here to the exception, so if you don't fit into this exception, then you are a transient vendor.
Alderman Carver.
another question for you, Alderman Dumas. I guess this is not allowing peddling. This is allowing permanent for a period of time, more what we consider a food trailer. But this is not addressing peddlers, correct?
Well, it's, I can't speak specifically to what a peddler would be. The idea with this is that anyone who rightfully comes to the city clerk's office and gets the correct permits would then have the authority to where they now sell only on private property. They could have the authority to now sell within and again, it can't stress enough, they have to be legally parked within those confines of a public parking place. They can't just park in the right of way. But they would have to meet whatever those permits allow, and I don't know what all those are. I guess when you look up top, it says good, wares, merchandise, or services. So it's a pretty broad context, from that standpoint.
Alderman Carver.
One last question. Marquita too, does this satisfy all the Department of Health requirements for food safety and the fact that they get their, what's the name of the class you gotta have?
Now, for food safety, we send them to the health department. They have to get their certificate from the health department.
And they gotta bring that to you?
And they bring that to us. That's correct.
Okay.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board?
One last thing, Mr. Attorney, just a friendly question. In light of all the comments that have been made, does this proposed ordinance contains all the language, including the language that you're indicating for the rational basis that would meet the legal requirements?
No, I think a factual finding needs to be made as to why the line needs to be drawn after R1 or some other designation. I was just about to speak on that. I would advise the board to come to a policy decision on where to draw that line, whether it's R1 or whether it's after all of the R designations, because then you separate commercial from residential, or whether everybody gets to go door to door or nobody gets to go door to door in any. And if we draw a line, make a factual finding as to why that line is right there.
Further questions or comments? Any further questions or comments from the members?
Let me ask, is what does the statute, the state statute we're referencing here, 19-7, what does that say specific to door to door? Are we confusing the fact, are those still considered transient vendors?
They are. I mean, we incorporated every substantive provision of the state statute. So if it's not specifically addressed in here, it's not in the state statute.
Further questions or comments? Any further questions or comments? Alderman Carver.
I guess one last for Alderman Dumas. I just let it be known that I'm totally against any kind of transient vendors in residential areas. So I mean, I don't think y'all are going there with that, but
But you gotta define that. You gotta define what, like say, it says sales of goods, wares, services, or merchandise by sample, catalog, or brochure are exempted.
why don't you just do, instead of a zone, prohibit any for any mobile transit vendor from visiting a residential unit or something, a known residential unit. That excludes duplexes, apartments, and then your R1 type structures. But
Just put your period after neighborhoods.
Yeah.
they get everything. Okay.
But you still have these, you're still gonna have people door to door. I mean, they're not gonna be selling hot dogs and hamburgers, but they're gonna be selling books and things like that.
Magazines.
Yeah.
Further discussion? Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll move to our citizen comment portion of the public hearing. And we will conduct this as is standard practice for public hearings on ordinances. We will alternate hearing from those wishing to speak for and those wishing to speak against the proposed ordinance. and each person will be given a maximum of 3 minutes. Each side total will be given a maximum of 15 minutes. We will continue that process until either each side has exhausted their 15 minutes of allotted time or until no one else wishes to speak. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Is there anyone now wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak against the proposed ordinance?
Good evening to the mayor and board. My name is Alvin Turner, Ward 7. The ordinance that are working need to be printed in the paper so that we can understand what we're doing and we're not breaking the law. This right here, we work our police officers hard already. You all undoubtedly hadn't tried to break up two women fighting, two men fighting. That ain't easy. You're getting more scars and scratches. You're putting more stress and strain on the police officer. Because if a person cannot do what they want to do, that's going to start a fight. Think about it. You probably have to help the police out.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Is there anyone now wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Seeing no one, is there anyone now wishing to speak against the proposed ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak against the proposed ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak for, against, or indifferent to the proposed ordinance? Is there anyone wishing to speak on the proposed ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing no one, that will conclude the citizen comment portion of our public hearing, and we'll now hear final comments from the members of the board. Alderman Dumas.
Is it, Chris, instead of doing this and trying to look at it from a rational side, because I have some of the same concerns, I don't want this in residential areas. Is there a rational basis that could be made that we only allow the door-to-door sales or other type of activities within those areas that we just put into our form-based code areas? Because there's a density there, there are parking requirements there, there are on-street parking spaces unlike anywhere else. I think there's a way that I could even rationally look at that. Would that, from a legal side, be a basis that we could stand on?
Under rational basis scrutiny, which is what this would fall under, if there is a legitimate governmental reason for the distinction, that reason is presumed correct unless challenged. That's a big hurdle because the presumption is that it starts off as valid. So the way I can answer your question is yes, if you can make a legitimate distinction about why a transient vendor is in a certain part of the city and not allowed in others, that would go a long way towards standing up under the law.
And I think considering 182 and Russell Street and Lampkin and Main Street and University, those without a doubt are the areas that I think the greatest interest would be. Highway 12, there's no possibility of this, and I can think of no other roads that would have parking ample enough, nor the interest of vendors to be there. So I throw that out as a. Ben, did you hear what I said there? About forcing that to a. So it should be unlawful for any transient vendor to engage in the business of door-to-door sales outside of the area zoned form-based, or we can word that another way, but.
You could just enumerate
Yeah.
the zoning classifications. Whether it be T1, T2.
T1, T, okay.
Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, I think probably the best approach to proceed with this is for the gentleman from 5 or anyone else to articulate to the city attorney as to how we should proceed with considering this at final passage. The ordinance should be reduced to writing before final passage. So I would just respectfully recommend that, and of course I'm not in opposition to this, that we just give the city attorney some direction as to which areas you want to have it in, and he can, I think, come up with the rational basis in what he's hearing at the table, and then address these other legal concerns that were, tended to the board tonight. And we can take it up at the next meeting.
Mayor, may I tag on to that? I would agree, because that would be a substantive enough change that would trigger an additional public hearing, and so we, it would when you talk about different designations of zoning of where the transient vendors can go.
Do we have any additional concluding comments? Any final comments from members of the board?
Well, then let me make this on the record then, that we strike, that we rephrase section 30-31 to be, it shall be unlawful for any transient vendor to engage in the business of door-to-door sales outside of the areas zoned T4, T5, and T6. And is there a need, is there a finding of fact that needs to be associated with those, Chris?
It does, and your rationale for why those zones are included.
Due to density? And this could be outside of those areas zoned T4, T5, T6 due to density, availability of public parking places, and I'm just throwing those out there, but.
And that's the rub. I would recommend, since we need to have another public hearing, that we think about that rationale and spell it out completely in detail, and that way your factual findings are substantial.
Understood.
Any further concluding comments from the members of the board?
If I may, I'm sorry, or in terms of, we're going to spell out where we want them to be, we currently have transient vendors who set up on Highway 12 and Louisville Street, for example, selling teddy bears or Valentine's or whatever. I'm assuming you're not trying to exclude those from that opportunity.
And I don't think anything's going to be passed tonight.
No, but
it's not
those.
up for action,
But I think that brings up a good point, because we're talking about two different issues here. I mean, those individuals are located on private property, and I want to be clear that these individuals, the activity in the roadway, and perhaps this is where we need to work over the next couple of weeks, Chris, is figuring out how to be sure that we don't force the issue in either way.
Be happy to.
Point well taken. I agree with that.
Any further concluding comments from the members of the board? Any further concluding comments? Do we have any further concluding comments? Seeing none, that will conclude the second public hearing on the potential transient vendor ordinance. And that will carry us to mayor's business. And our lone remaining item of mayor's business this evening is a report from Trip Muldrow, who is a consultant we have engaged for services related to the establishment of a redevelopment authority. Trip actually had his first meeting with our newly appointed steering committee this afternoon, and I'm going to let Trip now tell you all the good things he's working on.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Wiseman, and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'll be brief. I do want to thank you for having me work with you all on this effort to create a redevelopment authority. You appointed a 9-member steering committee that'll be working with me on the project. That's comprised of members of the board, members of the P&Z, members of the business and development community here, and we convened today and had a very good discussion. Today was really what we call task 1 of the project, which is the kickoff. There's a pretty big learning curve about what a redevelopment authority is, what they can do, the powers that they are, and so I gave a presentation on that to the committee today. The next step in the process will be actually working on an urban renewal plan, which is part of the state statute, and it's one that will fold into your comprehensive plan of the city, so it'll appear before the Planning and Zoning Board, and we'll be working with the steering committee on that. You're fortunate in that a lot of work's already been done with regard to that, so we'll be folding some work that's already been done with the charrette process you engaged in last year into that actual redevelopment plan. From there, we'll be looking at the different options that are available to you as a board as far as establishing a redevelopment authority, and that'll include things like who you appoint to the board, the powers that you grant to the authority, and also some of the options as far as capitalizing an authority of this nature. We've had the pleasure of working on a similar project in Pascagoula. The Pascagoula Redevelopment Authority has been in operation since about April of 2011, and they're really doing some phenomenal things. And you may be familiar with your neighbor to the north, Tupelo, has a long-standing redevelopment authority agency that's been working in the Fair Park District. The whole purpose of examining this, as you know, probably from your prior discussions, is to look at having a vehicle through which city government can engage in more public-private partnerships to look at development and redevelopment in the downtown area and adjacent areas to downtown. And so that's what our task is, and we're looking at probably about an 8 to 10 week process from today to sort of get through this effort. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about it. We had a very productive discussion today. It was just the kickoff meeting, so a lot of questions back and forth, and then we'll get into some more. And I imagine through the process there may be some additional briefings that I have before you, or we'll have one of your representatives who serve on the steering committee report back as well.
Do you have any questions or comments from the members of the board?
Tripp, I just want to thank you for everything you've done. As a way of formal introduction, Tripp was here initially with the Main Street Association charrette, and is a certified planner, sits on the planning board in Greenville, South Carolina, and obviously is very qualified to look at not only what we're doing here, but he's also doing the same for the CVB and the partnership. And so we're very fortunate and very pleased to have you on board to help us with this.
Thank you, Alderman.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Mulder.
Thank you.
And that will carry us all the way to a presentation by Toby Sanford with the Golden Triangle Planning and Development District on initial.
Mr. Mayor, you skipped the internal control consultant.
Oh, gosh, yeah, I had circled it and it didn't go on consent. I apologize. That will actually carry us to the consideration of the acceptance of an RFQ from T.E. Lott and Company. Alderman Sistrum.
We started down this path of asking to have a consultant to help with internal control reviews after we had something that should have been caught, a human error, and should have been caught, that was not caught timely, which indicates that there was something of a failure of our internal controls. We issued our RFQ. We've received a proposal back from T.E. Lott, and given that the city clerk's office has just gone through, or is in the process of finalizing, I should say, software conversion, I think it's appropriate to look at internal controls now that we have that new system in place, in addition to the thing that set us down this path to begin with. I'm going to move approval of accepting the proposal from T.E. Lott and Company for the role of internal control consultant with the scope of reviewing grants administration, payroll, and accounts payable.
Alderman Sistrunk has made a motion to accept the RFQ proposal from T.E. Lott and Company for the internal control consultant with the scope of their review to be limited to grants administration, payroll, and accounts payable. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Sistrunk, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, when the Vice Mayor said that the consultant is going to review payroll and administration, etc., what do we mean and how do we define as review? Exactly what will T.E. Lott do?
They, there is a proposal in your packet, and there is a narrative in the proposal where they talk about what they will do. They will go through process of inquiry, observation, and inspection of documents or walkthroughs with personnel, a combination of those procedures to understand and identify the likely areas where there are potential misstatements. It is an accounting process that just puts us in a position of having done everything we can do to ensure that that processes are functioning as they should, that there are safeguards in place, and that our financial statements will be properly stated.
One last question, Mr. Mayor, to the Honorable Vice Mayor. Do we have any consultant in place at this time who is performing any type of duties, tasks, or functions with regard to internal control of any aspect of city government?
I suppose that the software vendor might be doing that. I'm not aware of that, though, but they do not hold the same standard of care that a CPA firm would hold.
Are you aware of the board, or has the board, to your knowledge, in this term, authorized this type of level of of consultant working in any other department in the city?
I think you probably know the answer to that question.
And that answer is what?
I'm going to defer to you to answer it in the fashion that you'd like to have it answered.
Mr. Miller, may I be further recognized?
You may.
And I guess it's going to set the stage for it down into the personnel agenda tonight. Ms. Poole, let me ask you one question. Could you come up one moment, please? Good evening. Just got one question. I don't want any explanation. We'll address it when we get there. Just got one question. And then and this is related and germane to what I'm fixing to address on this matter here. Who directed the city clerk to consider outsourcing for her department?
To my knowledge, I believe the mayor had the procurement idea. Beyond that, I wasn't in those discussions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, as to this particular matter, I wanted just to get an honest answer from my colleague from the other end of the table. And obviously the reason this was not responded to because the answer is no, we have not done this, to my recollection, in any other department. And that goes to the question of the comments, rather, that came from the citizens' comment area. And Mr. Alvin Turner, resident of Ward 7, who resides in Pecan Acres, said we need to treat the city clerk's office fairly. Now, and I agree with that. And it is my opinion that we should treat all department heads equally and fairly. What this motion is doing tonight, and we're going to talk about this at another point in the agenda tonight. This is a method of trying to privatize work from a department within the city to an outside entity. And by privatizing, the board is proceeding to allow someone outside our governmental payroll to come in, be involved, monitor the administration, the payroll, and other relevant aspects of the city clerk's office. What this is saying here is that, we don't have the confidence in our city clerk. Now, over the last 15 years in this city, there have been 3 key areas in which a board has considered privatization. More than a decade ago, the board considered privatizing the janitorial services down here at City Hall, and that did not happen. The board at some point, and prior to Ms. Boyd's leadership, considered privatizing the sanitation services. And thirdly and finally, the board, even prior to this administration, considered privatizing the debris collection. Now, at one time, Waste Management did it, Starkville Recycling did it, but the question is where and who is performing those services at this time. Those services at this time are being performed by the city of Starkville. And the reason that is because the city wants to keep its impulse on the day-to-day operations, and rightfully so, of the debris collection that have once been privatized. In the instance with Waste Management, Stark Recycling, we, the board, found out that it was best to have our own employees fulfilling these functions, because we could have direct interaction, direct control over an employee on a day-to-day basis, opposed to a independent contractor who is performing matters in a contractual nature. So this is nothing new. Now, if there's a problem with the city clerk's office, we need to address that, and we can address that in executive session. But from a point of view of trying to remedy a situation by spending, a speculative amount of money, there's been no documentation that really addresses what is going to be the budgeted amount. And of course, we spent $5,000 tonight, which is a good thing. Of course, for the youth council out of the contingency fund. Now $10,000. The contingency fund just seems like it's just a spend as you go fund. But the point here is that that we should not be trying to privatize. I'm kind of keep this focus here because I got some more things I want to address later at another subject matter. But I think that this is the wrong approach, trying to run the city clerk's office through outside sources. Now, and I'm not aware of any other department where we do that. We have other department heads come up here when there's vacancies or when there's issues. We'll accommodate them. If there are a new position to be created, we accommodate them. When there is any problem, deficiency, and the point that I'm trying to make to this specific agenda item, because I don't want to be overlapping for later, and the point remains is that if there is an issue with the city clerk's office, we need to address it. This is not in my opinion, a prudent way to go about trying to rectify something that has happened in the past. So I think this is because whether it is seen right here tonight or not, this has citywide potential implication. If you let this privatization, it's just like the matter, and I voiced it years ago when it came with the sanitation. I said, if you start privatizing with sanitation, you're gonna hurt the economy in terms of a local job. People are gonna lose jobs. Then what's gonna happen is when this firm, and it's a reputable firm, no disrespect to this firm, but when they get in here and start looking at our own books, no telling where we may be headed. I mean, we have to be real careful, and that's why I opposed the privatization with the janitorial services back more than a decade ago. That's why I opposed it with the sanitation, because it has the tendency to take away what we have. I think we have the mechanism in place to run our own city, and we have people. If we don't have them, we can hire them. We need to rely upon our own employees to run the city of Starkville. We don't need to start sourcing this out or privatizing. I'm not aware of any other department where that is being done. I mean, there's no other department along these lines where I'm aware of where this is questioned about a problem. Administration, payroll, receivables. Basically, we're questioning the city clerk. That's the bottom line. So I would suggest that we give more deference to the clerk and let her run that department, and not do this. And of course, it was one issue that came up, and of course, I don't think it's at a magnitude where we need to go out and get this internal control. So I'm just saying this very respectfully. And Mayor, I'm about to yield the floor, but I'm going to address some more things under the personnel matter when it get to that point in the agenda. But I think that this is a wrong approach, trying to get outsiders come in and tell the city clerk how to run her office. And that's what the department head is for. The department head is to provide that leadership. And whether majority of us agree, and I'm used to being in the 6-1s. That's 5-2s or whatever. But the will of the board should be that in my opinion, let's keep this within our own staff. Let's not get these outside individuals involved in the operations of our government. And I think that's a wrong approach to move toward. And I think it's just not prudent in a conservative way of operating our city. So I want to yield the floor.
Further discussion. Do we have any for Alderman Sister?
I just have two things to say in response. First, I don't see this in any way as privatizing what the city clerk's office does. This is, at best, a very, to put it in a term perhaps that is more relatable, it is a very specialized form of an audit. We go through an audit every year. Audits by nature are based on samples and are not intended to detect everything, nor to dig into the, to be able to fully explore all of the internal controls that are in place. There's simply not time to do this. This is just an expansion of that. Secondly, I'd like to say that while we talk about having singled out the city clerk's office, there are at least 3 things that are on the agenda tonight that could have easily been handled by department heads. Perhaps easily is an overstatement, a bit of hyperbole, excuse me. But there are 3 things on the agenda tonight that could have been handled in-house through our existing department heads. First, redevelopment authority could fall within the planning department's scope of work. Secondly, the payroll staffing salary survey and job description review could have fallen under our personnel department. And lastly, redistricting could have been done in-house. We've chosen to get outside help with each of those issues because we recognize that we have limited staff available and we sometimes need outside help. This is just a question of getting additional outside help. I don't think Ms. Outlaw has any reason to, or the city clerk's office has any reason to be opposed to the idea of having some outside help. It's something we do regularly, and it is not an attempt to privatize the functions of the city clerk's office.
Further discussion. Alderman Ball.
I said I wasn't gonna say anything tonight, but outsourcing, Ms. Trump, I've been there before. I really wasn't gonna say anything. So if any other department have a problem, are we gonna do the same thing for another department?
Absolutely. If you'll bring it up, we'll vote on it.
And then the next department, and the next thing you know, the whole city will be in a corrupt, just like Sarah Lee out of business right now because we started outsourcing. When we started outsourcing, it didn't stop. It just kept trickling on down. I said I wasn't gonna say anything tonight, but this came up because I have seen it happen. Outsourcing. People's don't care nothing about you when you outsource. They does not have the best interest in heart when you go to outsourcing. And I just had to say that because I seen it, and with my own eyes because I was part of it.
Further discussion. Do we have any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman Parker.
Is there a way to put a not to exceed amount on this?
I think it would be difficult to do because we don't know exactly. I think it would be difficult to do without talking to the people at TE Lot. I mean, I would be making a wild guess about how many hours I thought they would have. I think it would be difficult to do without consulting with them.
Further discussion. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Alderman Sistrunks' motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 4 in favor with 3 against, this measure passes. And as we've got another presentation coming up, and we've been here for a little while without objection, I'm going to move us into a brief recess. Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, we'll stand in recess. Meeting will now come back to order. And we'll pick up right where we left off with the initial presentation from Golden Triangle Planning and Development District on redistricting. Gentlemen?
Mayor, Board, we thank y'all for allowing us to help you with the redistricting process. I'm gonna go really quickly through a crash course in census geography, which may be something that everybody here already knows, but I find that if I show how the Census Bureau counts people, how the census actually works, it helps in the redistricting process. And in fact, this is our ward map, our existing ward, and we have 2 plans here that we've created. Plan 1, I have 7 maps for everybody. Plan 2, I ran out of paper, so I have 6. If somebody will have to share, or I can bring one back when I get my paper. All right, this will be I think all of y'all have this little sheet in front of you and this sheet, and we'll go over these in just a minute. The U.S. Census Bureau, every 10 years, they count people. And they have what's known as census geography. And a lot of people just don't understand what they do. But you can see patterns here. You can see this is Choctaw County, Oktibbeha County, and there are 3 forms of census geography. The biggest is the tract, and that's just the largest form of census geography, and that's that tract right here, let's say in Oktibbeha County, 950-200. Within that tract, they count people. They know how many people live within that large tract right there. And that's how they say, well, this is how many people Oktibbeha County has, is because they know how many tracts there are. They all have numbers, and they all keep up with all of this demographic information. The next form of census geography is called the block group. And what the block group does is it splits the tract down into little smaller areas, and they all have numbers. So this is block group 3. Tract number 950-200, block group 3. Every tract has its own block groups. It doesn't have any specific number, but usually around 4 or 5, depends on how big the tract is. Usually they limit tracts per population. The next form is the block boundaries, and we'll zoom on over here to the city of Starkville. And I want to show y'all one thing that the Census Bureau likes to do without informing people. These are the 2000 census blocks. These are the blocks that were used to redistrict this map right here. You can see right here there's a block boundary. And within that block, just like they do in the tracts and census, they count people. So within that little block right there, they know there are 5 people. And then they say they're all white, 5 white. And that was the 2000 census. Well, in 2008, somewhere around in there, the Census Bureau went through and they decided to consolidate some blocks by population, by estimates, what they think the population is going to be. So they take blocks and they made one where there used to be 3 or 4. Or they took where there used to be 1 and broke it into 2 or 3. So this used to be a block boundary right here. That block boundary went away. And I'm sure they didn't call you and ask you or do anything to that effect, but that is a ward boundary right there. And when that block went away, that kind of messed up how your count goes, because no longer can you count just that block. It's this one huge block now, and they're saying there's 102 people in there. I just wanted everybody in here to be aware of that before, so you can see that on some of these maps, you'll say, well, this doesn't follow the block boundary. Well, there's nothing I can do about that unless we want to split that block. Since we're redistricting anyway, if it was a matter saying that the city would not have to redistrict because of that, I would say, yeah, we would want to do some counting and see how many people's on each side of that line. But since we need to redistrict, the deviation is so high, I don't believe there's any need in that. So that would be the board to decide. Since that block went away, we kind of have to guess or use the numbers that show up within that without using that entire block. So using that information, we have what's called the benchmark. And the benchmark is using the 2010 census data that the Census Bureau just sent out and the existing ward boundaries. Well, you can see right here how that's affected that right there. That used to be your boundary. But since that's no longer a block boundary, we can't use that boundary because we don't know how many people are on this side and how many people are on this side. So what you can do, what's called a house count, you can go out and you can use a formula and you can figure out that kind of stuff if that was something that needed to be done. If we look at this block right here with our information here, you can see that it's this whole area. Now they split 3 blocks out right there. That's got to be that, what is it over there by the hospital? It's
Chandler Park.
Yeah, that's right. That's right there. And then they split that out. And you can see that in these blocks right here alone, there's 405 people, 389 black and 2 white. And that's just the way they decided to do it. If you look at this sheet right here, using this benchmark, I'll quickly go over these numbers and then I'll hand out the plans that we have here and then let y'all look at them. And what you're going to want to do is take this plan home, review it, look at it, decide what you want to do, mark all over it. Because once we get a plan that we like or we get down to a final stage, I'll print all new maps. So that's no problem. This benchmark population, you can see, you take the total population, which is 23,888. You divide it by 7, and that gives you an ideal number. If it was an ideal world, that's how many people you would want in each one of your districts. Well, that's not how it is. So what you do is you take that deviation. What's the deviation between what's actually there and what should be there? You can see the District 1 has 1,710 too many people. District 2 is in the hole 706 people. So it needs 700 people added to it to get closer to that ideal number. District 3 is 1,101 people too many. District 4 is in the hole 374. District 5 is in the hole 582. District 6 is in the hole 649, and District 7, 503. With those numbers right there, you calculate what's called the variance. You take the percent of all these numbers, and what you do is you take that deviation, you multiply it times 100, you divide it by that ideal number, and it gives you a percent variance. And there's a definition down here of what that variance is, and it just shows you how far numbers lie from the mean. It's just a statistical term, and it's what the Department of Justice uses to decide redistricting. You see that to get this max variance, you take the lowest number and the highest number, and you add them together, irregardless of that negative number. So you can see the highest is 50.12, the lowest is minus 20.68. You add those two together, irregardless of that negative, and you get a variance of 70.80. The Department of Justice requires redistricting above 10%. So we fall into that. We don't have a choice. It's a redistricting thing. All the other numbers through here, you can see that this is just your benchmark figures of what your total population and your voting age population. Y'all have any questions about this? All right, we can move on to our next part. Dave, you can hand out that Plan 1. And each one of you gets one of these maps. And I'll show on the screen as well. I'm just going to go ahead and turn out to you. And I only brought 7. Mayor, I can bring some more back.
I like my dad.
This is our Plan 1, and this is not the PDD's plan, this is the City of Starkville. We're going to do whatever y'all want, because it's y'all who decide this, and we'll send the Department of Justice whatever is decided. Whatever the board votes in and say this is the plan we want to back. So in Plan 1, if you got one of the sheets on you want to do it. My computer decided to do that.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
What's your name?
Toby?
Toby, I got a question right. Okay, on this plan right here, say Ward 7 plan, that mean I got 3318 people in that ward with that plan right there?
That's correct. That's what Plan 1 would do is, and you can see that it brings us down to 7.53% variance, which is under the 10%. The Department of Justice, as long as it's under 10, it could be 9 something, and we would be fine. Let me see if I can get our plan to work. Here, Dave, you can control the computer. If they have any questions, we can zoom in anywhere if they would like. So, go to the regular map. There we go. And this is the exact same plan y'all are looking at here. We can zoom in to any area. Also, the way we redistrict now is much easier than the way you used to have to do it with the paper maps. You can show how you can just zoom into an area and then click on the block. So this is how easy it is. That block right there has 4 people in it, 4 white. I'm used to not having my laser pointer, I just got one back, so excuse me. You can take this and just move it to 7. That's how, so now that block moved to 7, you can see these numbers automatically recalculate. So anything that we could do this in a work session, if you say, well, let's move this block, let's try moving this block, all that easily could be done. But this plan, you can see our deviation changes. Instead of 1 being 1,700 too many, we got it down to being 153 too many, which makes that deviation 4.5 instead of 50.12. The next, the lowest would be District 6. It has a negative 3.03. It's in the hole 104. And adding those two together, you get to 7.53. Or as far as the 2 minority districts, this plan does keep them above 63%, and it keeps the voting age right at 60%, which is all that is required by the lawsuit that was done, I think, 10 years ago. Y'all have any questions about this plan? You just want to study it and get back with us and reschedule and go?
I don't speak for the board, but I know that I'm gonna definitely need time to go home and put this out on the table.
I don't need time to go
follow
home.
up with it.
This is not good. Just my personal opinion.
A good question would be, how do you intend to get feedback from the board on the plan?
I would say that they could call me, or in generally if they wanted one at a time, come by my office or look at the way we do it, or a work session. We schedule off a day and we come in here and we sit here for 6 hours. And we move blocks around. To keep up these numbers in the way that to get this number under 10%, there are different ways to do this, but then we have all these other rules and regulations. We have to keep District 6 and 7 above 63% minority, to have the 2 strong minority districts.
But aren't we also keeping neighborhoods together when possible?
Well, we do try to keep that. That would be one of our
And
criteria.
we're keeping people of similar interests together.
Yes. Well, when you can, we do like to do that. Sometimes you have to get under that 10%. You don't have any ways to get around it.
Another criteria that I think we looked at when I'm sorry, Mr. Vaughn.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think another criteria that was important to some of us on the board was that there be logical geographic breaks, which will also get to some of those issues of neighborhoods and and areas with similar interests.
I give Ms. Bull the criteria that y'all will look at and adopt on your next board meeting. It's the same, pretty much same criteria that the board adopted 10 years ago as far as what we're going to try to stick to. The 10%, under the 10%, keeping areas of interest together. Try to use nice geographic areas when possible.
And I got to, I'm sorry, he was waiting for.
Are you gonna keep all us in our ward? Is this making sure that all us is in our
Yes, sir.
ward?
I got a list of all your addresses today and plotted you, and everybody is still, in both of these plans, are still in the ward that they serve. Unless I made a mistake, and if you see that I did make a mistake, let me know and we'll fix it. None of this is set in stone right now.
Further questions or comments for Mr. Sanford?
We'll have this conversation later.
I got a question about Ward 4. And Alderman Perkins can probably help me with this. When Ward 4 was initially not created, I guess, was it cut out to be? Go ahead.
My understanding is the thought process behind it was that you would have at least one ward that had predominantly student representation.
I did not see that criteria, or maybe that's something the board wants to add to the criteria. And when they look at it and get the attorney to amend it and change it to that, because it's not in there at the moment, and there is no law that says that we have to do that.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board?
The problem with District 4 was that it needed 374 people. And all by itself, it's above 10%. And you have to have it from somewhere.
Well, I know, but it actually is the closest to the ideal of all the wards on the list, and yet geographically looks the most dramatically shifted.
To pick up the 300 people, and you're 100 people over, you could drop a few people. Not to say that. It could drop off, but the only place for them to go are the districts that touch it, unless you funnel them through some other way. Now, these two districts, to keep those minority districts strong, you can't add no minority to them. If you start adding anywhere no minority to them, that's gonna start dropping that number. The only thing you can add would be high minority areas, anything that's above 50%. If it's below 50%, that 63 and 64 starts dropping.
I'm aware of that.
Do you have a preferred method for moving through this process with boards?
We're flexible. I don't mind any way that the board would like to do it. If they would like to come by my office and look, or I come by their office, or we have a work session with the whole board, and we work just like this. Just like Dave showed you, you can move blocks anywhere you want.
Alderman Clark.
My personal preference is before we go and everybody comes to your office individually and weighs in, let's just do that in a public setting. I mean, I don't want to go and meet with you privately and somebody else meet with you privately. There's no, all I'm asking for is just a time to open that up and look at it. So maybe if you want to do something a week from now on a Tuesday night or Tuesday afternoon, or I think we need a week. It shouldn't take more than a week to go home and look at this, but.
We're for y'all.
I think it's good that you can get on with the technology we got now, and we can tweak those. And let me ask you a question: if we start messing with boundaries and blocks, and there's certain areas somebody wants or doesn't want, or vice versa, is that going to correlate into this? Is that
sure?
It's as we do it, we're going to have real lifetime data numbers for us. Okay.
They'll update immediately.
Okay.
What the percentages are and all that information.
Alderman Vaughn.
I got a question. I see that you moved J.L. King Park out of 6 into out of 7 into 6. Yeah, it's right in here. It's right in here.
That little road right there. Zoom in right there, Dave.
Matthew, I've done too much work, Matthew.
Cut the blocks off and put the aerial photography on. This is it right here?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
And there are no houses?
There's no houses in there.
I can take a look at that. One thing you can do is if you know an area where there's no people, or even if there are people, you can split these census blocks. It's not easy, but in areas like this where there are no people or no houses, no population, I can split that out. That can become your ward boundary. And it's 0 population here. The population that does exist, how many people are in that block? We'll probably have to cut him back on. There's 297, so when we split that block, all those 297 go to the area where people live, and then this block gets 0. So yes, that kind of thing can be done.
Perkins, it's okay.
Yes, fine.
I hate to get rid of it.
Yes, fine.
Would y'all like to look at handout plan 2? And then,
Absolutely.
And then y'all have any more questions?
Appreciate that.
Mr. Brewer, you gonna back me up on that? Matfield, we done done too much work.
Alright, whenever we get done, I can give y'all a share this one. And then I'll leave this one with y'all.
I don't want Eric to want this, but Eric, I'm gonna have a copy.
Do I?
I'm gonna have a copy. You can.
I don't want to ever look at that. I'm serious. Let's get it.
Looks like you'll like this one better.
Do I? On that one? I don't know as far as. And Latin very much. I wish I got elected in church. We can make this. I wouldn't.
This is plan 2, and it, this can be done in many ways, as long as we keep up with all the things we have to do.
So this is Plan 2, you flipped it here too.
District 4 doesn't go down for did Dave get the demographic sheets here?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Do you have an extra one there? This plan still keeps our minority districts high, above our 63%. And the numbers are here as far as what the deviations
Sandy's getting everything down Academy Road.
Yeah, she comes all the way to Sherwood.
Yeah.
What's the block, what's the census block look like in the Hiwassee area? So, it working? So this area right in here. I would imagine that's a, so two areas. One is,
There's Hiwassee.
right. So from Hiwassee over to Reed is one block?
Let's see. 94. Yeah, it is. That's
And
one block.
what about the block right there?
That is all one block, and then they have one small little tiny block there with 0 population or something.
You see what he said? So this block that,
That's PC.
this block, that's Cheyenne, so the Carson.
Right.
But we could, there's currently no population west of there. Well, there's some population along Hospital. There's significant population about to be in place here.
Right.
I don't know how we can plan for that. but-
Doesn't matter.
All right, go a little further east. A little more. All right, what's this block? What does this block right here look like?
They're all little bitty, I think, this,
What about
Street
right
west.
over in here? What is that block?
it's a pretty big one, I think. 280.
Okay.
And then these two right here together, 32. And then that one center has 18.
Okay. See, Henry, this one takes me all the way over. This takes me over to Carver. I get the corner of Carver.
You blue.
I'm blue, yeah, so this is JL King Park here. So I would go over, get that, go down and get Henderson Ward Stewart. and then go across Curry Street.
And these were just two plans that we got together just to show that we, just to get it under 10%.
Yeah, we understand. You could skin this cat a lot of different ways.
That's right.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take these plans, look at it, and suggest we have a work session.
And what we can do from there is we just take the benchmark, and that's the existing boundaries, and we start moving blocks, and we start seeing if we can get it under the 10%.
Right.
And still abide by all our rules.
Now, we can have a work session next Tuesday. I'm going to be out of town that afternoon. There's a chance I won't be back in time. However, since I'm running in every district anyways, it's not completely necessary, and I won't be offended if y'all went ahead and had the work session without me here next Tuesday. Yeah. Or we can move to a subsequent Tuesday.
Is there a rush?
No rush other than that once very long timeline we had between the census and the 2013 elections is getting shorter quickly.
Once we get this together and submit it to the Department of Justice, we have 60 days to look at it. Sometime within that 60 days, they're going to call me, the attorney, everybody on the list, and ask them about the plan, how we came up with it. They have another 60 days from that telephone call. That's 120 days.
I do have a question, aside from our looking at this. At what point do you have public meetings to?
That's right, we have to have at least a week to inform the public in the paper, a week in advance. We have a public hearing and we present.
Just one?
The law requires one.
But we can have more if we think that it's appropriate. We could do them in various parts of town.
Let's say we present this plan right here, and we get public input, and we have to make drastic changes to it. Drastic changes would require another public hearing. If we go back in session and change things, then if we do minor changes, we can get by without another public hearing.
I don't think we want to get by without public hearings. I think we want as much public input as we reasonably can.
Alderman Sistrunk, I would advise two public
Oh, I
hearings. That's
advise
what a
two
municipality
as well.
is. Most of them do that.
Is this ArcGIS file that this is based off of, is it available or is it proprietary? Like, would it be
The
possible?
ArcGIS,
I mean, I know,
it's about $1,000.
no, I know the software, but I'm talking about like the actual.
Data.
The data,
Data.
yeah, I can give you the data, so you can play with it all you want, if you have access to it. And you don't have to use ArcGIS. I do have some free software.
Open source.
Open source.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd love to get it.
You have a card or somewhere that I can, or you can come by and I can give it to you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come by.
All right. Does the board want a calendar or work session? Do you want to just take these and review them for a while and come back at a later date and set a work session? How would y'all like to proceed?
What if we each came up with our own list? Because I've got a couple of just little minor things that I would like to move, in particular between Alderman Perkins and my ward. They definitely agree that Alderman Vaughn needs to have J.L. King Park. So I think we could probably come up with a list of those type things, perhaps get those out there of targets we would like to hit for sure. And perhaps then be presented that alternative at a public, or at a public meeting. Not a public meeting in the sense of the process, but as a work session.
Yes, I'm just looking for a course. And I understand you may not want to set every step of the course out, but a next step at a minimum.
Well, in 2 weeks, let's make our recommendations due. Then we'll provide that, and then in the week after, or the meeting after next, I'd give them 2 weeks to incorporate that and look at other opportunities, and they can do exactly what they've done here.
So do you want to calendar a work session at that point in time, or do you want to just leave that to be set at a later date?
I'd leave it just to be scheduled within our next our 2 board meetings. So next board meeting, in 2 weeks, we have to you our list of recommendations. Here are the things we want and don't want. Get those to them and then just
So
see.
they'll go to them.
Well, but we don't need to bombard them with 15 emails. I think it
I
would be
don't-
good from a
Write 'em all
collective.
for the
I don't
meeting.
need to be the
Yeah.
go-between, but between them and the board on this. So if there's feedback given, it needs to be given directly to them.
Well, who's their,
That's fine with us. That's what we're here for.
Okay. All right, well, then we give them, we do that over the next couple of weeks. Then in a month, they come back as a part of this board meeting and do this again with what they've seen. Because it may look like a starburst and there's no way possible to absolutely accomplish what we're at. And then we've got to get to a point, I mean, we could go through these type things for the next year and look at one plan different every night. And we've got to get to a point where,
So to summarize your thoughts, the board would provide feedback in an informal manner to the consultants over a period of the next 2 weeks to a month. And at such time, when feedback has been sufficiently given, they would come back either to a board meeting or to a work session and present revised maps.
absolutely.
Now you can be so formal as to make a motion setting a timeline, or we can just leave that as that was the end point of this discussion. And what we'll do is, if we leave this as an informal ending to the discussion, I will leave it up to you guys as our consultants to determine when you've received enough feedback and you are ready to come back with subsequent plans. And y'all just call either me or the chief administrative officer, and we'll get you calendared for a meeting at that point in time. Okay. Is there any member of the board wishing to make a motion or deal with it in a more formal manner than that? All right. Seeing none, we'll leave it at that.
I will leave these two maps to go as well. So you'll have extra. We appreciate it. I do believe it's not going to be as bad as it seems. We'll get through this. We not get a plan.
Oh, I need those, yeah.
And then there was an extra plan too. All right. Yeah, and then I can bring some more. So everybody real quick, we didn't look at this. These are just some quick facts. This just tells you what the Census Bureau, the city grew by 9.2%, where pretty much every county and city that we've worked with has only got except Rockford Office. I believe the city of Columbus lost 2,300 people around here. I put this in there just to show y'all that the Census Bureau is wrong sometimes. The city streets that we use for this come directly from the Census Bureau, and they put Treasure Lane just right south of 82 there, and I don't believe that's actually where it is. And that's where we show it as well, because this data is census data, and that's where we get it all from. This was demographics sent in 10 years ago. I provided that for y'all to look at. And then the benchmark figures as far as the map. And then just the table that goes along with it. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll get back with you.
Oh, thanks, sorry.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is a request for approval of the City of Starkville Fire Department claims docket.
Move approval.
Motion's been made by Alderman Corey to approve of the City of Starkville claims docket for the fire department as of February 16, 2012. It's presented. Alderman Corey, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Corey, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. And that takes us to the request for authorization to hire a temporary full-time person to work as a deputy clerk in the city clerk's office. Discussion, Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, to get through this as easy as we can, it is my understanding that there are 2 vacancies within the city clerk's office. When we left at the last meeting and made the hire for the person in question last meeting, that left a vacancy for the person that went into the position. And I understand that the clerk has received a letter of resignation of an employee that will resign effective, I think that's Friday, clerk?
Thursday's his last day.
Thursday's the last day. Now, so that's going to give her 2 vacancies. And instead of hiring, Ms. Outlaw, and I'm not, you're the department head, I'm not trying to run your department, but now, instead of hiring a temporary full-time person, would you agree with me that you'd be better off if you just had of the 2, there was a choice between the 2, the temporary full-time versus having a full-time person, would you be better off with the full-time person?
That is correct.
Okay,
But-
so that's answer my question. Go ahead, I'm sorry, let me cut you short.
Well, I was just gonna elaborate on the request for the temporary person. And it was to allow time for the software to get in place and to look at a possible reorganization of the office.
Okay, now, so you done got into a little bit deeper than I was intending to get. Okay, now, Mayor, okay, let me say this. So, are you saying that you're not in favor of getting you don't want authority to advertise for a temporary, for just a deputy court clerk tonight?
For a deputy clerk.
Yeah, do you want the authority tonight or not?
I'm asking for the temporary.
So the answer to my question is yes or no?
Yes, I would not turn down a position, a person, no. But my request is gonna be for the temporary person, and that's just to give me an opportunity to look at a possible reorganization.
Okay, now, Mayor, Board, be patient with me a few minutes. Ms. Outlaw, now, Ms. Spruill has already answered my question about who directed the reorganization, and she indicated in so many words that the mayor directed that. Now, if I'm wrong, I want to speak out of turn, and I'm not, being negative anyway, but I just want to get to the root of this. Now, why, you got 2, you got 2 positions, and you talk about reorganizing and possible outsourcing. Let me give me your rationale. I want to just dialogue with you for a few minutes. Tell me why you talk about reorganizing versus then on your sheet here you talk about possible outsourcing. Tell me why you think about possible outsourcing. Why you think you're talking about reorganizing?
Well, I had fully intended to reorganize or present a reorganization plan sometime back last year. We got into situations in the office that did not allow time for me to get one together.
No, Ms. Outlaw, go ahead, I'm sorry. We just gonna talk,
Okay.
we just gonna have a conversation. I mean, it's nothing, because we need, the public and the city needs to hear this conversation. Go ahead.
Okay. And then after we were into budgeting. After we got out of that, we were into auditing and just various things in the office kept me from coming forward with a reorganization. And therefore, I put it on the back burner. After the December incident, and I how it came through with the personnel, hiring the personnel. It was when Mrs. Trump said at that meeting, last meeting, said, well, you know, some of the other departments are reorganizing. And I said, well, I had thought that, so I was gonna bring that back forward. It was a conversation that the mayor and I had about possible procurement being contracted and abolishing a position. And I explained to him then that I could not abolish a position during my reorganization that I had intended without losing some work. That means some functions of the office had to go elsewhere. That's when the conversation of the procurement possibly going to a contract vendor.
Now, are you telling me that Ms. Spruill answer to me was wrong, that you are not directed to present this and bring us a reorganization? Is that information true, that you are directed to reorganize your department? Just be honest with me now.
I'm being as honest as I can be with you, Alderman Perkins. We had the conversation, and there was no direction. It was more of a question that if procurements were outsourced or contracted, could I abolish a position? And I explained to him that I would work up a plan to see exactly where we would be, but it was difficult not knowing what the software, the time that the software was going to save us.
Once you given the directive that you either reorganize that office or you're going to outsource purchasing and procurement? Yes or no?
No, if I had to just give an answer, I was never given a directive to do that.
So nobody told you to do, you're just doing this on your own?
No, we had the conversation. When we had the conversation, the mayor did ask me if the procurements went out, would I be able to abolish the position? And that it was possible that someone would contract the procurement. It was a young man that sits on the MAGPA board. That was the extent of that conversation.
Well, if you're going to reorganize, well, why did you bring that position to us at the last board meeting then, to fill the position that was the center of attention last or the center of discussion? If you're going to reorganize at this meeting, why did you bring that position to us at the last meeting?
Well, the reorganization was going to be to just get the flow of the office and let the alderman know really what everybody in the office was doing, what duties and responsibilities carried, and to reassign some functions that was better served by the city accountant, some functions that would have better been served by the purchasing agent, and to really just shore up some of the functions, duties and functions in the office.
I want the table to be a little bit more patient with me, and of course I want the public to understand. I mean, I'm not fighting Marquita, I'm not attacking her, but I want to make sure this is the right thing to do. Now you talk about the reorganization now, and you talk about outsourcing, and when you talk about outsourcing now, I want to put words in your mouth. What do you talk about possible, when you say possible outsourcing of some functions, what's your definition of that?
Well, those were the functions, the purchasing and procurement were to abolish a position, and that was the conversation in order to abolish a position.
Okay, tell us what you mean. Tell the public, when you say abolish position, are you talking about allowing some outside entity to serve and provide purchasing and procurement function for your office?
Yeah, that's for the city.
Yes. So you're telling me you are looking at the possibility of making a recommendation to the board for the board to engage in some type of arrangement for some outside person that is not an employee to perform purchasing and procurement function for the city of Starkville?
That was one of the reorganization that I was going to.
And where do you get that idea from?
Well, and that's what I was saying. That's the conversation that the mayor and I had.
Can those functions not be handled by your office now?
They are currently handled by my office.
Well, why do you need to look at possible outsourcing? If they being handled by your office now, well, why can they not continue to be handled by your office?
And they can continue to be handled.
Well, if they can, well, why is your recommendation to potentially look at that?
That was in an effort to abolish one of the positions in the office.
So what is your bottom line recommendation at this point as to how your office should proceed? I mean, what do you want this board to do as an overall picture for the city clerk's office to function? Do you want us to get rid of purchasing and procurement? Do you ever want to hire anybody else? You have enough people to do the job? You need to less people, or what do you want done?
Well, that's why I was asking for the temporary person, because at this point, with us going through the software conversion, and I really had put the internal control on it on the back burner, but with that going through, it's gonna be Grand Central Station in there, and I can't fly too short. I'll be 2 people short come Friday. And a temporary person, it was something I can get in quickly.
And Ms. Outlaw, let me say this, and I have fully supported you from day one, and you know that. And there's been plenty of discussion about your office, and no, I promise you, there's no disrespect here, but that's why I'm trying to get some understanding, because there was a very lengthy discussion in 2004, if you recall, when your office no longer performed the tax collection duties, when the city allowed its unified and uniform tax collection to be collected by the county. So that's why I'm trying to get an understanding, because I understand the bigger picture here, and I am not satisfied that we need to go to privatization. And I'm going to say a little bit more briefly. I'm not want to be too redundant here, because we looked at that. We looked at that more than a decade ago about privatizing the janitorial services. We saw that wasn't going to work for City Hall. And what you're considering here, I don't think it's going to work at all, because you're considering is sending purchasing and procurement out maybe to some other entity. The city of Starkville needs to run the city of Starkville. Mississippi State, if they're going to be involved, they need to run Mississippi State. Columbus needs to run Columbus. West Point needs to run West Point. We need to be in charge of our own duties, just like when we discussed years ago about privatizing. What I mean by privatizing, allow some person or entity outside the city to run that, because the problem that we have here is it's not only just your department, that's the small picture. The big picture is the city of Starkville. If you let that snake raise his head in your department, it's going to raise its head in other departments. I've seen it. I've been there. That's why we are now having control historically over the debris collection. Waste Management had it. No disrespect to those companies. Starkville Recycling had it. The reason that we got it, I heard this discussion from these aldermen who's been and gone, and it was that because, in all great respect to them, because the city wanted to have control over its governmental operations. We want to have control over our employees, whereas if you got a person who's an independent contractor, they're in a contractual arrangement. You may call them, for example, the debris. They'll come out here when they get ready. But if we got Ms. Boyd to pick it up and the mayor call and say, we want these tree stumps or whatever you got on in Long Meadow or in Greenbrier picked up, it's going to happen. Why it's going to happen? Because those people work directly for us every day. We don't need to go into that path, of going outside. Now, if you want to reorganize, we need a good, true reorganization. I'm not trying to chastise you here, but I'm just talking about a little history here on how we've done this. That's a dangerous path to go down to. Historically, it has not worked with the city. The city tried that with the debris collection, but we didn't try it with the proposal to privatize the janitorial service here at the City Hall, nor do we deal with the sanitation. So, and really, and you got 2 vacancies, and you're telling us tonight you want us to approve a temporary full-time employee, and you want to forego our giving you the authority to advertise for a full-time deputy court clerk. Now, of course, I'm not the department head, and then you're talking about you got the conversion plan that's going to put you further behind. So I don't know what the game plan here is. but maybe I need to see a reorganization before I haphazardly vote on this. See, because you got two vacancies. You got two vacancies here, and you want a temporary part-time here, and of course, I don't know how many hours this person going to work, and then I don't see no reorganization plan, and then when this person get in, it's just temporary. Now, what we're going to do about all this other? We got the conversion things going together. I think what we need to do is, if you want to reorganize, just like I told these other department heads, electric, I think that's the most recent one I had. I want to see the plan. I want to see the plan before I just kind of piecemeal this here. We just need to, maybe we need to wait and don't take any action on this tonight, because I'm not for no privatization. If it was Ms. Boyd up here, if it was Mr. Clemens up here, if Mr. Randy Boyd, Mr. Chief was up here, I'd tell him the same thing. If it was Mr. Roger Mann was up here, I'd tell him the same thing. I don't take any pick and choose. I've been here 19 years. You all know I don't do that. I just call it as I see it. I mean, it's all about trying to do my job. I love my job. That's why I'm still here. So, but I don't want to piecemeal, and I have great respect for our city clerk, public, people, everybody. Marquita's done a great job, but we need to see the reorganization plan as opposed to piecemealing it, because I'm not for sure what this is going to work. And so I want to know what it looks like. If you're going to outsource it, I want to see, because you left me here with the thought, the city clerk is currently looking at the reorganization of duties to the department with possible outsourcing. So I want to approve something tonight. Then next week, I want to privatize. Now I'm locked in on a vote. So, I would suggest, since you don't want to give you the authority to advertise for a deputy city clerk, that we just toughen this out to the next meeting. We just tighten our belt. We can multitask. It can be done. It's just a matter of a commitment, and just come back to the next meeting with a reorganization plan, so we can see it. And in that reorganization plan, since that's what you want to do at your own direction and at your own will, voluntarily, without anybody directing you, I want to see the plan. And otherwise, I'm not going to vote for this tonight without, if it get put to motion second, I'm not going to support it, because I want to see the plan. I want to make sure it's going to work. I want to make sure the plan is going to work. That's what we do with other department heads. Mr. Kemp, of the elected department, brought his plan, whether I agree with it or not. He brought a plan. I haven't seen a plan on here tonight. So, and we're going to meet again whenever that is, the first Tuesday in next month, and we just wait and fill it then, as opposed to just piecemealing this, because what we normally do, we normally just go ahead and get a recommendation and give authority to fill the position. For some reason, we are reluctant and want to do that tonight. So I'm not comfortable with doing that. We get put to motion. I can accept democracy. If I get voted in, that's fine. But I don't think we need to approve this tonight, because there can be some further discussion down the road with this. We just need to be true to ourselves and true to what we're saying, and let's just be all honest about this. I just want a clean discussion. I want clean answers, just like I asked Ms. Spruill. I appreciate Ms. Spruill's honesty. And so I don't think this is a good thing to do tonight. And Mr. Mayor, I'm not fixing to offer a motion, but I like the board, in no disrespect. And you all know I'm not picking on Marquita, but the bottom line is, we need to wait and see we get a written plan. What's wrong with that? And otherwise, in closing here she says she want to look at a reorganization of duties with a possible outsourcing. In other words, there's no definiteness as what she wants to do with her department as to these positions. So let's wait until we get a plan, and we can look at it just like we look at these redistricts. We can see whether we want it or not. If we don't like it, we can say some more about it. And that's what we need to do with this. It's no different. I'm not taking sides. I just plow straight down the road. And whoever's in the path, it's just the bottom line. And that's the rest of the story. So I'm not in favor of supporting this, but for all these reasons tonight, I want to see a plan. And Mr. Mayor, I yield the floor.
And Alderman, with all due respect, what what the city clerk has asked the board for tonight is an opportunity to make a plan. She has been very forthright that she is working on a reorganization, but the details of that are not complete yet. She's also been very forthright in acknowledging that her department, because of a major software change and because they are extremely short-staffed right now, cannot withstand the amount of time that it's going to take her to finalize her reorganization proposal. So she's asked the board for a temporary position to help staff the office while she goes and finalizes the plan to bring to this board. I think it's a completely reasonable request. Further discussion?
That was just my question was, if, I mean, undoubtedly she needs help in her department, so a temporary full-time would allow her to assess that and come with a plan? Would that be fair?
But that's what I was asking for.
Alderman Sistrum.
I move approval of hiring a temporary full-time employee to work as a clerk in the city clerk's office for up until 6 months from the date of hire, as she finalizes a recommendation for, actually, till 6 months from the date of hire.
Alderman Sistrunk has made a motion to authorize the hire, or the advertisement, authorize the hire of a temporary full-time person to work as a deputy clerk in the city clerk's office for a time not to exceed 6 months from the date of hire. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
And to be compensated as described in the packet.
As presented. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Sistrunk, do you wish to speak on the merits?
I think it's been spoken of.
Discussion. Alderman
I got
Vaughn.
one. Is this outsourcing coming up under this motion?
No.
No. Hey, let me
You're saying
take
it right
the
now,
opportunity.
but later on down the road, I'm asking, is it coming up under this motion? Because if it coming up under this motion, I don't want no outsourcing. If it coming up under the motion, I support the motion. But if the outsourcing coming up now, I don't want to hold my hand up for that.
Yeah, let me explain what has transpired and where this is right now. City has been approached by a vendor, actually the same vendor that spoke at the regional meeting that we had last month. It's a consulting firm that does procurement services for contract. That is a possibility. I get approached by vendors for many different functions in city government. And if there is something that a vendor approaches us with that is appealing, I will have a conversation with department heads about it. The city clerk and I have had a conversation, and we actually have sat down together with the vendor to talk about how such a relationship might work. So depending on how the city clerk evaluates that situation, as she moves further into evaluating what the vendor could potentially do and whether that meets her needs, then it's certainly possible that part of her reorganization could involve the outsourcing of procurement services. But that's something she'll determine in a review process. Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, let me just respectfully ask you a question as the chief executive officer on a day-to-day basis. Did you, as mayor of the city of Starkville, direct or request or suggest for Ms. Outlaw to pursue a reorganization plan for her department and or to consider outsourcing as we've been discussing tonight?
Alderman, it was exactly as I just described it and exactly as Ms. Outlaw has described it to you earlier tonight. We have had a series of conversations about services that a vendor is potentially offering and how that might fit into a reorganization with her department. Alderman, I assure you, any reorganization plan that is brought to this board for the city clerk's office will be brought by Ms. Outlaw.
Call the question.
Question has been called. Is there any objection to
You
moving
cut
the
me
vote?
short.
You can object if
I
you'd
still,
like.
I still had the floor object.
Okay.
And my next question, Mr. Mayor, and let's have some decorum at this table. My next question is that, my thing is, I want to see, this department head treated the same as all other department heads. I am not aware of this level of involvement of requesting for other department heads come forth with reorganization. And that's what the gentleman from the citizen said tonight. We need to make sure we treat her just like we do others, and there's nothing wrong with that. We need to, and I'm getting the appearance, and even with the question answered by Ms. Outlaw, Ms. Sproul, and others, that that Ms. Outlaw was under the auspices of coming up with some type of reorganization plan and or outsourcing this. And so, my thing is, let's just make sure that that each department head is afforded the same level of comfort in running his or her department. And I'm getting the sense tonight that that's not happening with the city clerk's office. I yield the floor.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Sistrunk motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 4 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. And the final matter under personnel on the agenda, without objection, I'm going to render moot by the previous matter. Any objection to not proceeding in discussion about the request for authorization to fill a full-time position in the clerk's office? Any objection? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed with the agenda, and that's going to exhaust the open session portion of our agenda. We do have...
Mayor, I move we move into closed session.
All right, Alderman Dumas has made a motion to move into closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Dumas, do you speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Dumas' motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. We'll now move into closed session to determine whether there's a need for an executive session. And without objection from the members of the board, I'm going to move us into brief recess. Any objection?
Very brief, please.
Brief recess.
Extremely